And a very good Friday afternoon to you. Welcome in. It is the Chico Bormann Show here on the Big Play Network. You can find us on Twitter as well. You go to Twitter and type in Chico Show CLE. If you're not following already, do so, and we appreciate it. Also on YouTube, you can check us out. Type in that little search box there, the Chico Bormann Show. It'll come up. Hit subscribe. You're ready to go. We're ready to go on this Friday. It is good to have you all here. Be with you till 3 o'clock. Coming up in the 2 o'clock hour, which is also the second hour. I was going to say the 2 o'clock hour, but that wouldn't be grammatically correct. Uh-oh, we've got him laughing already. He's back, kids. He's back. Bohm, Michael Bohm, producer Michael Bohm, who decided to leave us and go visit some of his band groupies in New York City. Bohm, it's great to have you back. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Chico. You know, I foresaw a very rough week in Cleveland sports, and I had to get away before it actually happened. So it is good to be back now in the seat for the NFL draft, which is, since 2007, I think my favorite day of the year.
Since 2007. No, why would that?
What year did they draft Joe Thomas? That was 07,
2007, right? Yes.
I got really into the draft that year, right? I was dead set. I was so convinced that the Browns needed Calvin Johnson. And when he went second overall, and this was like I started watching highlights, you know, what I considered film at the time, and I was probably like 15 maybe. But I remember crying at a Browns draft party when Calvin Johnson went second overall.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
15 years old?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. True story. So
I don't know if we should. We might have to present that in fair or foul.
Crying about.
You cry. Now, granted, you didn't know Joe Thomas was going to be Joe Thomas, but still crying that Megatron went to the Lions.
I was so convinced, Chico, he was going to be what it took to take this Cleveland offense to the top.
So that was when you became enamored with the NFL draft.
Yes, ever since then, and then I started joining like a bunch of draft forums. I started watching. I tried, you can't get like all 22 on all the players, but ones that I could find, I would try to watch on prospects for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chico, I was really into
you
it.
even go down the all 22, right? So you're really.
I'm not there anymore. I just love the draft at this point. It's not worth the grind because I'm not a draft analyst. I'd rather put that time into music and everything, but I love the NFL draft, Chico.
I think Dane Brugler has the beast and you have the Bohm. And that's what you I think you gotta put something out there, Bohm. Wow, that's one thing I did not know about you. I feel like I know a lot about you. Some I don't want to know about you, but I did not know that. So it is great to have you back. Now, I do have to ask you, you were in New York while the Cavs were trying to win a series, and it didn't quite work out. Were you taking any heat? Were you representing with Cleveland gear?
I had a Cavs shirt on one day, but yeah, it was rough, Chico. I was getting it rubbed in a little bit by my New York counterparts in my band.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not necessarily like fans just walking the street or fans in your groupies.
You know what? We were in Nashville, and my singer ran into a guy in New York gear and just shouted out at him, "Let's go, Knicks!" The guy joined in and got all hyped up.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, good to have Bohm back in the house. Good to have you back in the house. You want to chime in today? Would love to hear from you. 216-626-7901. Yes, we are very festive in our Browns gear today. Wearing the Browns polo. We've got our Browns helmet. Bohm's going to put this on before the end of the show. He doesn't know it yet, but he will be. The Browns with selection, their first selection, will be in the third round. So the rounds 2 and 3 tonight, and I believe they get underway right around 7. So they're anticipating, and again, this is if the Browns stay at pick number 74. But if they stay at 74, the prognosticators are saying that the Browns should be right around like 9:30 in that neighborhood making a pick. So they have 74 and 98. And rounds 2 and 3, again, tonight, and then 4 through 7. That's how it works, right? 4 through 7 will be on Saturday.
Correct.
And they have still, again, 2 picks in round 3, 2 picks in round 4, 2 in round 5, 1 in the 6th, and 1 in the 7th. I'm guessing many of you are not projecting. You can't. I mean, we've been over this before. There's certain names, like if you're an Ohio State fan, Zach Harrison's name is kind of on a list that of someone that they might be interested in, defensive line help. As far as wide receivers, we've heard a lot of Marvin Mims. So that's a possibility as well. But in the end, you really don't know. I think the other question a lot of fans have is, will the Browns attempt to trade up? If there's, and I would say this, if there is a guy that they absolutely love, they absolutely want, I mean, some people were saying, well, trade up into the first round. They don't have that kind of ammunition. I mean, that's, you had to give up a lot to get a guy named Deshaun Watson. But, if it's moving back in a certain round or giving up, a fifth, or it could be a pick next year as well, if they want to jump ahead, and let's just say hypothetically in round 3, before 74 gets to them, if they decide, you know what, this guy is not going to make it past 67, we're going to try to get, bumped up a few spots here and go get our guy, then that's a possibility. But I think for the most part, you probably, I wouldn't say boring, that's not the right word, but it just doesn't have the flash, the glitz, the glamour. But again, that's not a bad thing, because we've had years where, well, all we had was the Cleveland Browns draft, and you started it in November prognosticating and projecting and trying to, it was usually a quarterback until, recent years. So anyway, Browns at 74. We'll talk to Chris Easterling. He writes for the Akron Beacon Journal. He will join us coming up in the second hour of the show. In terms of surprises in round 1, well, got to give it to Houston. They were throwing out those smoke screens right and left that it just didn't seem like they were settled on a quarterback, and that if somebody wanted to trade up, now again, they may very well have wanted somebody to trade up to them and move down. Who knows? But they ended up staying at number 2, drafting C.J. Stroud, quarterback out of Ohio State. Of course, Bryce Young, as you know, the number 1 pick. We felt like maybe that was something they were just throwing out there, but it's clear that Carolina, and they got a good one. I like him. I'm rooting for him. The obvious reaction to Bryce Young is, well, he's pretty small guy. He's small in stature, but don't think of him as Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield, even to some degree. Bryce Young, more than just having a rocket for an arm, which he does, he's very accurate. Obviously, he's a great athlete. The thing about Bryce Young is this guy, and Bill O'Brien said as much, that he is one of the he said he's only coached 2 quarterbacks in his time that were able to process information as quickly as, you ready for this, one Thomas Edward Brady and the other being Bryce Young. I mean, that's pretty high praise. Not saying he's Tom Brady, but he processes information quickly, and Carolina's liked him for a while. So Bryce Young goes number one. Yes, Bo.
Chico, I don't know if you caught the interview with Ryan Day talking about that S2 cognitive test.
Yes.
Which CJ Stroud came under a lot of fire for.
Said it wasn't just that he was bad. Like they said like in the 14 percentile.
Yeah. So, I'm just paraphrasing what Coach Day said. But he mentioned that there are actually multiple scores for this S2 cognition test. And it's basically about you have to hit you have to see certain buttons and then hit them and react to it, and that's what it's measuring. So it has nothing to do with throwing a ball or like test answers or essay responses or anything of the like. So I think that there's a lot that's fishy about that score. Now I understand why teams might put some stock into it, but apparently there's only about half the league that is.
Yeah, but the half that does submit this test or have this test, whatever, they are absolutely positively. And I don't think it was, here's the other thing. I don't think it was so much that CJ Stroud didn't do well on it as much as it was the discrepancy between like Bryce Young. I think Young did great on it. I think Richardson did great on it. I'm not sure. I think Levis did not as well as those two, but I think he still did pretty well. And then it was like a very steep fall off to CJ Stroud. And I mean, it in the end, it doesn't hurt him. So that's great. Now you say he's going to Texas. Is that going to Houston? Is that going to work out? Time will tell. I mean, when you're a high draft pick, I always say nowadays, I'm curious, Bohm, if you were a high school or a college quarterback, you're CJ Stroud. Would you rather, slip into the late 20s and maybe to a team that now usually that team might already have a good quarterback, but it might be on the older side of it. Would you rather go to a team where you have a chance? They know what they're doing. It's organized and good coach and good locker room. Or would you? How important is that number 2 overall, or Bryce Young's case, number 1 overall designation?
You know what, Chico? I think that would be a really important thing for me that I would value more so than the higher payday of getting drafted higher, because if you look at longevity, you have to imagine that there's a far greater risk of longevity being sustained in a more toxic organization. And then also, I think secondly, I don't know if I totally could see why an NFL quarterback would want to go higher, right? Like they're all competing.
Well, a lot of it's ego. Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a pride thing. But at the same time, like these guys have to know if you're going into a competent organization, like you're going to be set up for success.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if I'm CJ, you can't be upset about it because it is an astute honor to be drafted 2nd overall in the NFL. It's just like there's these lingering questions in the back of my mind of like, who are his weapons going to be? How is he going to be held back? I think that there is a lot of concerns surrounding that Houston team, and I'm hoping that he doesn't get thrown to the wolves, Chico.
You remember that 2004 draft, and many people now Ben Roethlisberger was going to be a good quarterback regardless, but I think he's the perfect example. Now it's not like he had a Will Levis like slide or Brady Quinn like slide or Geno Smith like slide, but he did go number 11. Rivers went first, and Eli Manning or whoever the order was, and then Roethlisberger, he was the next to go, but it was a little bit of time, and I think it was 11th overall. And people said, "Oh man, is that gonna?" It ended up working out great. I guarantee you, if he had it to do all over again, he'd say, "Let's do it." Now, what's interesting is back in the day, it wasn't that long ago, but I think Sam Bradford out of Oklahoma, when he was drafted. He was the last guy to get remember they would have those huge sign. It would be
the
like
max deal.
Be like 50. It wasn't even max deal. It was like 50 million. The signing bonus was just whatever. Okay, last year's guy got 42 million. Let's put it at 50 million. So if you want Sam Bradford, like they had to not only make sure that everything checked out, physicals and all that sort of thing. But then, oh, hey, by the way, this is what we're planning on offering you for a signing bonus. I mean, then, yeah, it's a big deal. Some will say that's also why a lot of these guys are kind of nudged a little bit to go, or were nudged a little bit more to go play and get out there as soon as possible, because owners were forking over big-time money for someone that was an unknown, and get out there and play. Let's see what you got. Now, I think truth be told, we all know that if you can go to a situation where you are not just, you're thrown to the wolves, because it's an adjustment. I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't care how great you are and how great you end up being in the NFL. You will have some struggling times. Now, Bryce Young, I would imagine, is going to be starting at, for Carolina day one. I mean, I would guess that's the plan. C.J. Stroud, probably going to be the starter in Houston week one. I doubt they're going with Davis Mills. Where I think it does get interesting is Anthony Richardson, because Anthony Richardson was, of all the quarterbacks, and we'll get to the Will Levis thing in a moment, of all the quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson was the guy that you said, man, we had Nick Shook on this week talking about it. He's so physically imposing. He has an incredible arm. He's an incredible athlete. He's a good kid, but he's just very, very raw. Like, there's a lot that he needs to get fixed. Now, I think Gardner Minshew is the quarterback right now there. Would that be the guy? Would they like to have Anthony Richardson learn a little bit under him, or do you want him to go? Bottom line is, they've got a new play caller in Indianapolis. I think it's that Steichen who was in Philadelphia. And Anthony Richardson can very much run. Completion percentage and all that stuff. I think he only completed like 54% of his passes last year at Florida. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But what I think is really, really telling when we look at this draft and we look at the quarterbacks, and again, Will Levis has yet to go. He was the Brady Quinn of this draft. Now, there were reasons, I think, for that. Rumor has it, reports are out there that, like, he was, let's just say he was very, very sure of himself, which is good, but there's a fine line, Bohm, as you know, when you're hanging around your rock star groupies there, that there's a fine line between confident and cocky. And that Will Levis was like, he was showing up to the interviews like with no sleeves and like talking about the gun show and like, like teams don't want to see that.
Yeah, there's a self-righteousness to it.
Yeah, you want to be confident, but don't be. And then there was a Reddit post that came out supposedly where he was telling his family that, I'm going in the first round. I'm going in the first round. And, you do feel for the kid. I mean, he's a young kid, whatever, young man. But it's kind of don't do that. Don't promise those sorts of things. Don't go in. Like, again, I know you want to come off as confident. You can't. You're not in this position anyway. Like, Bryce Young is not in the position he's in. C.J. Stroud's not in the position he's in. Anthony Richardson, and you can every year. A quarterback or any player for that matter going this high in a draft or really anywhere, they're not going to be lacking confidence, because to play Division I football for the most part, all these Division I players, and especially big school Division I football, yeah, you got to have some confidence or you're not going to be around. But again, that fine line between confident and cocky. And by all indications, Will Levis was very, very cocky. Now, I thought Ross Tucker, who I'm a huge fan of, I got to give him the credit here. I'm not going to steal it and pawn it off as my own, Bohm. That wouldn't be nice. So I heard an interview with Ross Tucker, and he actually tweeted this out last week as well, that said Will Levis essentially was Kmart. He said, if you want something cheap, like price-wise, inexpensive, you're going to Walmart. If you want something kind of similar, but you want it to be a little bit better and it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you want kind of a higher end, you're going to go to Target. But if you want like kind of just in the middle, you go to Kmart, is what he said. And he goes, you want to be one or the other. You want to be Walmart or you want to be Target. You don't want to be Kmart. You don't want to be the one that, like, you know, with Anthony Richardson, he's got a ton of upside. Obviously very physically gifted and all that stuff. Great attitude, all of that stuff, but he needs a lot of work. Will Levis needs a lot of work also, but he's also a bit of a, or at least has come across as a bit of an idiot.
Little Bo Callahan in him.
Yeah, there you go. That's the second Bo Callahan reference we have had before. We had McAllister before the show, Bohm during the show. So anyway, just getting your thoughts not only on how the first round played out. Browns, as we said, you're going to be waiting a little while. I mentioned this last week. Are you excited now that your day is here? Now, I know it's not 5th overall, and all, but now that you know the Browns are going to be selecting, you would think, and they've got 2 in the 3rd round. Granted, it's going to be a wait. You're going to have the 2nd round that has to play out, half of the 3rd. They're projecting around 9:30. Now, are you like super excited, or is it just tough when you have to wait this long and it's not until the 3rd round? I'm kind of curious to hear what people say. 216-626-7901. 216-626-7901. You can also find us on Twitter at Chico Show CLE. And do so on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button. I think the Browns, I mean, it's so easy to say right now. You go with, you have needs on that defensive line. You have needs, you would think, at the wide receiver position. But when you get that far, like if there's a player at a position that maybe you weren't thinking would be there, that maybe you weren't thinking was really even a huge area of need, do you still go and address that because you're not going to let the talent get by you? Now, we saw this in the first round. Like, a couple questionable picks. Jahmyr Gibbs from the Lions, like, wait a minute. Now,
their other pick, too.
Yeah,
Campbell.
But here's the thing. You have 2 running backs right now in Montgomery and DeAndre Swift. Now, if you remember last year, though, DeAndre Swift, not only did he have some injury issues, but he kind of got in the doghouse. Like, and I remember watching, they were Hard Knocks, if I'm not mistaken. I think they had the Hard Knocks last year. Because remember, it was Dan Campbell and, you know, all his, and you could tell in the running back room. You remember that? I think it was Deuce Staley was coaching, because Deuce Staley, I don't know if he still is, but he was the running backs coach with Detroit, and they were having like film session, and Deuce was getting ticked off at DeAndre Swift. Like, Deuce was going, dude, hit, go. Like, what are you waiting for? You come around here and then make that hard cut and go. And he just wasn't doing it. And so I would guess DeAndre Swift is probably out the door, but that one surprised a lot of people for the Lions as far as Jahmyr Gibbs. And then,
Chico, did you also see how hyped up the Lions front office was when they showed the camera angle inside the Lions draft room after they had just made the selection for a running back? They were amped. Like, they were so stoked to get him. And you just have to wonder if that might in part be because they can finally move on from this relationship with DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I will say, and this is where a program like Hard Knocks did do its job, because I would have never guessed in a million years that there was, and I'm not saying that there's bad blood there, but it was clear that in preseason, Deuce Staley was not happy with the way Swift was running the ball. And he's like, look, dude, we've got young guys here. We got Montgomery here. Williams is here. If you don't want to run hard, or if you're not going to be aggressive hitting a hole, then, hey, Don't worry about it. I'll play somebody else. And then he got injured for a little bit, and then there were a few games where they would say going into, say week 6 or week 7, he's ready to go, and he never saw a snap. The Jack Campbell pick is interesting. I tell you what, Captain Jack, that's what they kept calling him in the during the Ohio State game. That guy can play. I mean, I love the player. I can't sit here and intelligently speak of, well, he fits what they want to do. I don't know exactly what Detroit does. I know Jack Campbell is a big dude, 6'5", 250, and I know against Ohio State, along with others, that defense, they were great. They had to be because the offense was equally as putrid. But Jack Campbell, according to some people, he was getting an A+ grade. But Gibbs, yeah, that one was a stunner, a bit of a stunner anyway, from the Detroit Lions. But we'll see. Now you've got Levis available, you've got Hendon Hooker available. I think it's going to be. I'm curious to see what happens for those of you that say, well, the Browns don't pick until 74. What do the Steelers do with the first pick of the second round tonight at 7? I would guess they're getting calls. Jeremy Fowler is reporting that the Steelers are indeed getting calls to move up to 32 from teams that you would think are looking for a quarterback. Hendon Hooker is the kid from Tennessee who got injured late, so he's going to be a while getting healthy and whatnot. Will Levis, as we just told you, there's a lot of questions now. They were saying, what if Hendon Hooker goes before Will Levis, and what if Will Levis doesn't go in the second round? That's when you maybe have permission. All right, I want to pose this question. I was talking about this before the show with you guys, you and Dave. If you're Will Levis in that situation, and we all know Brady Quinn had the same thing back in 2007. If you are Will Levis in that situation, or any quarterback, any player in that situation, and the camera's constantly on you because, again, you're in the green room, you're expected to go in the first round, sometimes expected to go high in the first round, and you don't. What's your attitude supposed to be? Should you be, upset? Should you be, just kind of, hey, mom and dad, and Roethlisberger kind of had that attitude going. His dad and, his agent. Now, you would see behind-the-scenes footage afterwards, but Roethlisberger kind of kept a smile on his face, even though, between him, Phillip Rivers, and Eli Manning, nobody really knew which one. They thought Eli Manning was probably going to go first, but Roethlisberger thought he was going to be selected long before 11, and maybe even by the Cleveland Browns, but Butch Davis said, no, let's get Kellen Winslow. Anyway,
I'm a soldier.
What's that?
I'm a soldier.
I'm a soldier. Yeah, you're doing something now. You can take that attitude and that ferociousness on the prison football team. But seriously, what advice would you give? Should you look happy still and not happy, grinning and skipping around, but just content? Or do you look angry? Some would say, oh, look angry because you're a competitor. You want to go. You should be going before this. But then the other way I look at that, I was telling somebody earlier, the other way you can look at that is if those cameras are on you and you're looking mad and somebody goes to say something to you and you shoo them away or whatever, now all of a sudden you could turn it into first sign of adversity, and look what he does. Look at that. If he can't handle, being dropped down in the draft, and what's he going to do when, he's getting blitzed like crazy and he's, offensive line isn't doing their job because they're not very good. And so I don't know. How would you react to that? What would be the right way to act in a green room when you're expected to go higher and you just continue to linger and linger and linger as Will Levis did?
Well, I know for me personally, Chico, I would be visibly frustrated.
You'd have your guitar with you, though. You'd kind of...
Yeah, probably. Need some way to de-stress.
Yeah.
Just a tinge. But I think that there is something to that being calm and collected. I like that composure specifically out of a quarterback.
Yeah.
I think that even keel and that ability, there's almost like leadership qualities that can be seen from that.
Good answer, Boom. Good answer.
Yeah, at the same time, I know I would struggle with it because it feels like you're being perceived by all these people as just not as good as you believed you were. It's kind of a slap in the face, a little bit of a wake-up call. And so, I mean, I can't fault a guy for being upset about that because that's something that they can't control. It's a little bit different than being on the field and having control of a huddle. This is like relying on all of the minds of general managers across the league for hopefully one of them to recognize you for your potential.
See, the only thing about Will Levis, and I'm not trying to knock on the guy even more, but I said it last week. I don't know if it was with you or somebody else, or maybe a couple weeks ago. He couldn't even beat out Sean Clifford at Penn State. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Clifford was highly touted, but Clifford did not have a great year. Remember, the kid from Medina locally who's at Penn State, there was a lot of rumbles about, well, he should be starting over him. So Will Levis couldn't beat out Sean Clifford, which is why he transferred to Kentucky. I was I was kind of surprised at all the hype. Like, there was some saying he might very well be the second quarterback off the board, whether it's Houston. A lot of the rumors, a lot of the scuttlebutt out there, Bohm, was that Will Levis he wouldn't get past Indianapolis, and Indianapolis had a chance to draft him, and Indianapolis said, "Nah, I think we're going to go with that Anthony Richardson kid," and they both need fixed. But Anthony Richardson gives you more upside. It might be easier to fix than, say, Will Levis, is kind of what I heard.
Chico, I was astonished by the rumors that some people had Will Levis as the second-ranked quarterback in this class. I'm just astounded.
Now,
I don't buy it for a second.
You were really upset because it involves C.J. Stroud.
How dare they do that to C.J.?
Yeah. You of anybody, you were probably more upset than C.J. Stroud's mom and dad. I'm not going to say more upset than C.J., but you were close. Like, I think it bothered you more than it bothered Mama and Papa C.J. Stroud.
It felt reminiscent to me of, like, when Justin Fields got drafted. It's like, oh, God, what's he in for out there? It's a bittersweet thing, right? Because I like that C.J. is going second overall and getting recognized, and he's the highest drafted Ohio State quarterback in their history. So there's a lot of good for it for sure, but it's just, this is a tall task ahead for Mr. Stroud.
Yeah, no doubt. Chico Bormann Show here on the Big Play Network, also on Twitter at Chico Show CLE, and on YouTube, Chico Bormann Show. Hit that subscribe button if you would, please. Baltimore, big news yesterday. We've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. I just asked Eric Casillas about it. I'm like, if it's dead, where does he go? And he's like, I don't think he can go anywhere. Nobody's going to pay him what he's really looking for. And the thing that surprised me is in the beginning, and let's go all the way back like a month before now, Nick and I were talking, and I said, you know what? They're going to get this figured out. It's not like there's bad blood. And I'm not saying I thought there was bad blood like now leading up to, yesterday when the deal was signed. But I definitely thought that, like, you could tell the Ravens were not happy with those tweets coming out during, the owners' meetings and Jim Harbaugh's with the press. And then Lamar kind of fired back at a few things. And I was wondering, my whole thing was, did it go like to the point of no return? Did it go past that point where, clearly it didn't. And that's a big deal. Like Rodgers in Green Bay, that had been building and building and building to the point where it was just inevitable. But clearly, if you're the Baltimore Ravens, you needed to get that done. I think Lamar did very, very well for himself. And the process wasn't great, but I think Lamar did very, very well for himself. It's not the guaranteed money that Deshaun Watson got. I don't know if anybody's going to get that. I think we're finding out more and more it's going to be the outlier. But in terms of, he got more than Jalen Hurts as far as per year. And what the contract, now it's not all guaranteed, but when it's all said and done, it's still going to be a significant chunk of change. So if you're Baltimore, I think you're ecstatic right now. They brought in Zay Flowers, the wide receiver out of Boston College, of course, signed Odell Beckham Jr. I'll be curious to see with Baltimore, though, Bohm. We talk about new coordinators, and we talked about Indianapolis with a new coordinator. Baltimore, too. Greg Roman's no longer there. I don't think they get pass happy, but how much more do they throw the ball with Lamar Jackson than – because I think they were, along with Atlanta, I think it was like 1-2, the top rushing teams in the NFL.
They brought in Todd Monken, right? Former Browns offensive coordinator.
Yes, Todd Monken.
Went down to Georgia. And it is –
Devil went down to Georgia too, Bohm.
Something that those two have in common. How about that?
Devil went down to Georgia. He's looking for it. Anyway.
We get a banjo up in here. So it's interesting, though, because I don't know what Todd Monken's vision is with a quarterback that has the mobility of Lamar Jackson. Like, we've seen him work with Baker Mayfield. We saw him work with Georgia's quarterback last year, and it didn't feel like you have the same sort of capabilities that you might have with a Lamar Jackson. So I do anticipate, though, that they are really going to put an emphasis on airing it out. When you have those kinds of receivers, is Rashad Bateman going to stay healthy? There's certainly some questions around it. With
Mark Andrews is always going to be his number one regardless.
Yeah, and so there's also the pressure of coming back on you finally get your first massive extension.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's going to happen to Lamar, but a lot of players have tendency to decline from that point forward.
Well, okay. I'll go back to I had Eric Casillas on the show yesterday, and he said point blank, you've seen the best football from Lamar Jackson. That doesn't mean it's bad football from here on out, but have you seen – he did win an MVP, so that's not exactly horrible to say like, oh, well, you've seen his best football. His best football was the most valuable player. But – and this is where I think the Todd Monken discussion and – Lamar Jackson, I don't want to say like he's on the decline as far as throwing the football, but does Baltimore make a concerted effort that while they've extended him and they've given him this big contract, that they want him fresh for the end of the year? Because that's the big rub with Lamar Jackson right now is, okay, we need you to start and we need you to finish games in December and January. If you're not there in December and January, it really doesn't matter. Like what you did in the regular season, because you're trying to win in the playoffs and trying to get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. So I'll be very curious to see. I think they throw the ball more. I think there's more of a vertical presence to the game, to their game. And, Zay Flowers, again, I think he's a guy that can run, all the routes. You have Rashad Bateman. OBJ is really a 2 or 3, but he could still be a nice safety valve for Lamar Jackson. And as I said, Mark Andrews is always his number one. But I'll be curious to see, what the emphasis is on him running the ball. It's not going to be as much, but will they kind of try to curtail it as much as they can, which, again, is a weapon for him and is always tough to defend. But, now you're trying to weigh keeping him healthy and keeping him upright and keeping him ready to go for December and January when you need him the most. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. Okay, so the Browns, pick 74, pick 98. Those are the two in the third round. They could stay there. They could move up. Who knows? Second round begins at 7 o'clock tonight. The Steelers are currently on the clock. Will they stay there? If they do stay there, Joey Porter Jr. is still out there from Penn State. Boy, and Joey Porter Sr. not only played there, coached there. I don't know. I think he's still there. Mike Tomlin, he talked about how he knew Kenny Pickett. One of the things that went into drafting Kenny Pickett was, our facilities, we share a facility. I saw him every day. You better believe he's known Joey Porter Jr. since he was yay high. Since he was knee high to a duck, Bohm.
We'll leave that one there.
I stole that line. I like that line. And it comes from a guy that I like too. But yeah, he's known him since he was knee high to a duck. So if Pittsburgh stays, I don't think they're going to stay. You think they stay at 32?
Honestly, Chico, and you're taking all my fair or foul questions.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
You know what? Don't
just
answer.
Going down the list.
Don't even go there because we got a break anyway, and we are going to do fair or foul. So we'll do that next. Again, Chris Easterling, Akron Beacon Journal. We'll talk specifically about the Browns, what the mindset may be. Does he think that they're going to leave with 8 players? They have 8 selections. Will they leave with 8 players? Will there be a trade up? We'll talk about all of that with Chris Easterling from the Akron Beacon Journal coming your way at 2 o'clock. But when we come back on the Chico Bormann Show, it is time for another Bohm version, which we missed for a while he was out gallivanting and entertaining the masses and kissing babies and shaking hands and signing parts of bodies that shouldn't be autographed.
Kissing hands and shaking babies.
Yeah, something like, there you go. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Anyway, we'll do a Bohm version of Fair or Foul. It's on the way next. Chico Bormann Show rolling along on this TGI Friday right here on the Big Play Network. All righty, back live on this Friday. Good to have you along, Chico Bormann Show. You can find us on Twitter, Chico Show CLE, also on YouTube. Do that. And, of course, bigplay.com as well. A couple things we're going to get to later on. We mentioned Chris Easterling from the Akron Beacon Journal covering the Browns. We'll do that top of the hour. Boom, you know, because you've been with me for a few years now, even back into the radio days. I'm a guy that usually takes a lot of heat for lack of culture, would you say, or not knowing. Like, I'm always that guy that you haven't seen that movie, you haven't heard. There was one that came up this morning, and wow, I really, really took a lot of heat. So we're gonna get into that one as well. But
I was quite surprised by it when you mentioned it off the air.
I didn't think it was that big of a deal, and people were just like, they were dumbfounded, as was I. All right, without further ado, it's time for another edition of Fair or Foul. Michael Bohm is back, kids. What do you got, Bohm?
All right, Chico. Well, obviously NFL draft yesterday. We were talking a lot about C.J. Stroud earlier, but I want to ask you about another Buckeye, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I thought it was pretty interesting that he was the first receiver off the board, but he didn't fall until the 20th pick. And you're talking about how, like, the good thing for if a quarterback were to drop a little bit, maybe he falls to a better organization. JSN going to Seattle, that receiving room just seems absolutely loaded between Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and JSN. Now, I want to ask you, fair or foul, on paper, that three is the best top three receivers in the NFL.
Oh, gosh. I got to go foul on that. And I admittedly, I'd have to go around the league looking for three. But I'm going to go foul because, one, JSN hasn't taken an NFL snap yet.
It would be potential-based.
Here's the thing, though. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit as far as, you know, they're already loaded. You know where they did not do well last year? And I want to say they were like second or third to last as far as slot receiving yardage. Guess where Jackson Smith-Njigba lines up?
In the slot?
Yeah. So you're going to have DK Metcalf. You're going to have Tyler Lockett. I mean, Lockett at times, and they both do. But now you've got a legit, a legit underneath guy, legit slot guy who's going to be a pain in the ass to cover, and you're going to have to account for. And if you don't, or you put one guy on him, and he'll burn you with that speed. So I actually think that's going to end up being a pretty good place for him. And I think he's going to have an opportunity to shine despite a pretty loaded wide receiver room, as you mentioned.
Yeah, now, quick follow-up to that, because I am excited for him. I'm glad he's in the NFC, by the way, because picking 21st, the Los Angeles Chargers were next, and they did draft a wide receiver. And so the thought crossed my mind. I just wanted to ask you, fair or foul, JSN, had he fallen to 21, would be an even more wide receiver trio than the Seahawks.
Yeah, you're talking with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Now Keenan Allen, I'm hearing things that, like, because he has been very, very durable and reliable throughout his career, but last year he was banged up a lot. Mike Williams, we know. Mike Williams is one of the most dangerous receivers in the game, but he's had a bulky back going all the way back to his days at Clemson. But I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, again, where you utilize him, and that's in the slot, you move him around formations. I mean, I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill, but I think you utilize him in that sort of fashion. So I don't think there can be necessarily a quote-unquote bad landing spot for him.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, Chico. Now,
do you want it fair or foul? He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Is that? I know you're leading that way. I know you want to ask the question.
No, I won't put that pressure on you, Chico.
All right.
I did want to ask about another interesting storyline. I guess it's a couple storylines between two running backs drafted in the first round. I think it's got to be safe to say that a majority of people wouldn't have predicted that. And I think Bijan going so high to the Atlanta Falcons was pretty surprising. Now, obviously, Bijan, very talented. Some might even say generational running back. One-time Ohio State commit before decommitting. I'll just throw that in there.
Thank you, Bo.
Yes. But, of course, Atlanta, and you hinted at it earlier in the show, has one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL, top two in the league. including a guy in Tyler Algiers who set the rookie record for rushing yards. You would think a team picking 8th overall could potentially have more needs than just another running back in that crowded room.
More needs on not only on the offensive line, which they desperately need. You don't have a great quarterback in Desmond Ridder, at least not right now. Maybe he develops into one. I'm not throwing him out or anything, but he's got a long way to go. And then on defense, see, that was the one that surprised me. Is Atlanta? I mean, there were a lot of good. If I remember right, there were a lot of good, great corners that were on the board. The kid that went to New England, was it Christian Gonzalez? I think was his name. A couple other ones that they could have had, and they opted instead. Now, again, from just a pure talent standpoint, and like, hey, best football players, whatever. He may have easily been top 3, and your remark about generational running back, that was spoken by a few analysts and even some scouts and whatnot. But to your point, you already ran the ball last year. You were I think second in rushing attempts. It's just, and I love that he is a great running back, but that was a bit of a head scratcher, in particular when you have so many needs on defense, and in particular in that secondary. So I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out. But I will. What do we say? Fair or foul?
Well, so I wanted to get to the rest of the question because I wanted to bring up. Well, you had a good point to bring up. I don't blame you for interjecting there, but. Jahmyr Gibbs, the other running back who went 15th, I believe, to Detroit. Another one that maybe could have been perceived as a reach. Now, if you don't value DeAndre Swift, maybe you feel like they have a really big need for it. And Jahmyr Gibbs, also talented. Fair or foul, Chico, the Atlanta Falcons picking a running back in Bijan Robinson at 8 is a worse move than the Detroit Lions picking up Jahmyr Gibbs at 15.
Foul. And I mean, they're close, and trying to separate, what does separate it is obviously Bijan Robinson is special. So, Tyler Algier, if he's, I don't know, if he comes back and has another great year, and I mean, he had a good year, will they change a little bit as far as their offensive philosophy? Probably not. Now, the one thing Bijan Robinson does bring you is it's just like Gibbs with Detroit. They come out of the backfield. They catch passes very well. Gibbs, as soon as they made the trade, I'm like, oh, this is good. Okay, they're going to – and I like the Jack Campbell pick. Some didn't like that. I like the Jack Campbell pick. But the Gibbs thing, like I said, it leads you to believe then that DeAndre Swift has 1 foot out the door. And that is believable because they had a lot of, he didn't play a whole lot. And then you saw, if you go back to Hard Knocks and watch that in the preseason, Deuce Staley really had a hard time getting through to him, take aggressive cuts and make aggressive moves. So maybe that's it. But it was still a big head scratcher.
Yeah, and look, you have to wonder if with those top 3 quarterbacks going off the board, maybe Atlanta just said screw it and take who they thought was the best player available instead of that dire need at quarterback, which is honestly, I don't blame.
Well,
I don't
DB too. They need defensive backs in a bad way.
Yeah, and I don't fault them though for potentially picking up what could be considered a generational talent. It's just questionable, and I think that there are some lingering questions that the Falcons need to answer. Right, like what are you going to do with Algiers? Are you going to trade him, or are you going to make him take a back seat to this guy after he's coming off the rookie rushing record? It's kind of wild. Kind of like reminds me of James Robinson in Jacksonville. Yeah. Remember that, the Urban Meyer year? He was so good, and they just wasn't getting the opportunities.
Yeah. That will be a fascinating thing to keep our eye on, no doubt.
Quick follow-up with that one before we move on. Fair or foul, Atlanta's tanking for Caleb Williams next year.
Foul. I don't ever I never subscribe to that theory. Now, if you get late in the year, and would some teams consider it, maybe even do it? Yes, but this early on, you can't be thinking that far ahead. No way.
They got to pick up a quarterback, but they can't rely on Desmond Ridder for this season.
He did a few good things. I mean, does he take a step forward? Here's the other thing, though. On the offensive line, they don't have a great offensive line. That they could have gone there as well. So I don't know. I mean, I guess yes, you're taking pressure off of Desmond Ridder, but at the same time, should you have opted instead for, I think, a more dire need on the defensive side of the ball or even up front on the O-line? But we'll see.
All right, Chico, well, let's move on. I got a couple more draft ones for you, and you had referenced this before we started Fair or Foul. Joey Porter Jr., one of the big names left on the board, the DB out of Penn State, with the Steelers picking first here in round 2. And, of course, there are rumors swirling about that the Steelers could be entertaining offers for the pick. Porter Jr., of course, his father, Joey Porter Sr., played for the Steelers, longtime Steeler. Fair or foul, Joey Porter Jr. to Pittsburgh?
You know what? I'm going to say fair. I'm gonna hedge my bet here, Bohm. Tipico will appreciate this. I'm going to say fair, but I'm going to say that they drop back and they still get him. Like maybe they feel like, okay, Joey Porter Jr. could easily go and could be off the board, but depending on how far they move back, like who moves up, and you're guessing, well, Jeremy Fowler already reported there are 4 teams out there that have, at least 4, that have called the Steelers about moving up, and it's presumably for a quarterback, whether that's Will Levis, whether that's Hendon Hooker, we don't know. But could the Steelers, like, how far would Joey Porter Jr. drop? I think they definitely like him. I mean, I would if I was an NFL team. He was great in college. Yeah, so I'm going to say fair he does, but not at 32. They drop back far enough, they find a way to still corral him. So, there you go.
Yeah, and you touched on those quarterbacks as well, Levis and Hooker. And there's so many fascinating questions surrounding them because I think you got to like the upside of Hooker over Levis, but coming off of that injury is definitely concerning.
I think Hooker will go before Levis. I don't want to say he's going to make it out of the second round, Levis, but I think this fall is going to continue.
Wasn't there a recent draft where no quarterbacks went in the second round, like in the past couple years?
I mean, yeah. Here's the thing. You think about the first round of the draft, you thought there were 3 teams that needed quarterbacks that got their quarterbacks. I mean, there are others too, but there are 3 that really now, you know, with Levis and Hooker and the questions, and one of them's going to go early, maybe at 32. But I think Levis could be the one to slide. I think of the 2 of them, I know Hooker's hurt, but I think Hooker could go before Levis.
Yeah, I mean, obviously quarterback is the most important position, but those second-round picks are so valuable.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, Andrew Berry likes to make them count. And so, like, taking a quarterback that's in that second or third tier that you have so many doubts about being the guy of your organization, to me, it just doesn't feel like is worth a second-round pick.
Well, it depends on what you know, like a guy like Hooker, somebody might think is going to be great, but we know,
Sure.
like as a team, hey, are we all in agreement that we're willing to wait on this kid? We have no choice. We have to wait on this kid because he's injured, but that we want to take him here. We don't want to risk losing him because we think one day he could be special. If that is the consensus in that war room, then, yeah, you go ahead and do that. Where you get into trouble, and this is, go back in history, this is where teams do get in trouble. Like, you go back to the 2011 draft. Was that the Cam Newton when he went number 1 overall? And you had all these teams, like you had, I think it was Jacksonville go for
Blake Bortles?
Blaine Gabbert.
Oh, Gabbert, yeah.
Remember Jake Locker? I think that was
E.J. Manuel? Was that class?
Yeah, I think E.J. Manuel's in, I think he was 2014.
Okay.
I think it was the 2011 draft. The 2011 draft is where you had teams that, oh my gosh, you know, we're panicking here. We got to get a quarterback. Do I really think those teams were legitimately sold on Blaine Gabbert and Jake Locker? I don't. So, I don't know. We'll see how this plays out heading into the second round. It is going to be very, very interesting. Also, equally interesting, what are the Browns going to do? Now, again, it's been a while. You're going to have to wait, little while longer, too, because they're not going to draft until probably around 9:30 or so. But they do have 2 picks in the third, 74 and 98. And we'll talk to Chris Easterling of the Akron Beacon-Journal. Where might they go? Get his thoughts also on round 1. And, of course, Lamar Jackson is finally happy, we think, with the Baltimore Ravens. All of that still to come next. It is the Chico Bormann Show right here on the Big Play Network. And back live on this Friday afternoon, the Chico Bormann Show on the Big Play Network, also on Twitter at Chico Show CLE, and on YouTube. Type in Chico Bormann Show and hit subscribe. You're all set to go. Of course, also on this Friday, draft day begins for your Cleveland Browns. No, they did not have a selection in round 1. We know why. We know because of that guy at quarterback, Deshaun Watson. We hope that he's going to be very, very good this year. Great this year. They're going to need him to be. But the Browns will have 2 selections in round 3, 2 and 4, 2 and 5, and then 1 in the 6th and the 7th. Here to talk about that and much, much more. He covers the Browns for the Akron Beacon-Journal. He is Chris Easterling, and he joins us here on the program. Happy Friday, Chris. How are you, buddy?
Doing great, Chico. How you doing?
Doing well. Kind of odd, yesterday. It was still a fun draft, I thought, to watch. You had different scenarios playing out and whatever, but it was, I don't want to say necessarily bad, because hopefully Deshaun Watson is worth it, but it was kind of odd, I think, for many Browns fans that were, usually we're anticipating it since like November. So by the time April got here, we It was like a Super Bowl party, only it was your draft night party. Didn't do that this year.
Yeah, you sort of felt like you were missing out on something a little bit that last night. It's like everybody else is having fun, Hey, who are we getting? Are we trading? What? And you're sitting there like, oh, this is fun. That's an interesting thing. It's kind of like window shopping in a store where I can't afford that.
Yeah, I heard some people saying, well, maybe they trade up. That wasn't going to happen. Now tonight, might be a different story. We'll see if they make some trades. I'll ask you this. Let's start right there. 8 selections, as I mentioned, 2 in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then 1 in the 6th and 7th. Do the Browns come away at the end of this draft late Saturday? Are we looking at a Browns team with 8 players selected?
No, I think I can see Andrew trading a couple of those picks, day 3 picks especially, maybe for picks next year. I mean, that would be the more logical, the more along the lines of what he has done in the past, is trade one of those picks to get they don't have a 4th round pick next year. Get a pick for next year's 4th round.
Which he loves to do. He loves to do that.
He loves to do that. Yep. Now, if it was me, considering the way the 1st round went last night, and the way I think it sort of pushed a lot of guys that were 1st round talents into the 2nd round. How much does that push some guys lower in the 2nd round to, upper into the 3rd round, where if you're sitting there at 74 and you go, the kid from Northwestern, the defensive lineman from Northwestern, or, one of those receivers like Hyatt or Downs or somebody like that.
Mims, yeah.
They're sitting there and you go, well, let's package a couple of these picks, and instead of quantity of picks, let's go for quality of picks. Let's go get somebody. We'll call it a night early. We'll go get somebody in the back end of the 2nd round that we can put on the field from day 1, instead of getting more guys that are really kind of, they're back into the roster, if they're even on the roster, by the time you break camp and get to the regular season.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Do you think, and I know you mentioned both positions, if there was a guy to be had, and I kind of presented the same scenario earlier, that, hey, there might be somebody that absolutely is falling, that Andrew Berry says, let's go get him. Do you think that's more likely to come on the defensive line, or more likely to come at wide receiver, where they would absolutely try to move up and grab?
I think it would come on the defensive line. I think he even kind of, in a way, maybe hinted at a spot where again, I'm going to butcher the kid's last name. I think it's called Addy. He's Addy Barre. Is that's how it's pronounced? Something along that line.
Close enough. He's not listening, so don't worry about
it. Well, I don't want to insult any of his relatives who might, but a guy like that, he said they're going to add more defensive ends to this roster. He didn't say how they're going to, but if you get one of those defensive ends, one of those edge rushers, or defensive linemen there in the back half of the 2nd round, you can move into the back half of the 2nd round, top half of the 1st round, even higher than where you are. Go get them. Go get. I think they'd like to add another receiver, but I really think they are determined to give Jim Schwartz as much as he needs to get that defense turned around, because you're not going to win a Super Bowl just off of a great defense anymore. This isn't 2000, but at the same time, they can shore that up, because I think they feel like the offense is something that, quite frankly, it's already in the building. It's just a question of what you have in that individual who's already in the building in number 4.
We're talking to Chris Easterling. He covers the Browns for the Akron Beacon Journal. You can also follow him on Twitter at CEasterlingABJ. Browns getting set, I should say, for 2 picks, 2 selections in round 3 tonight. Again, rounds 2 and 3 tonight. We'll get underway at 7 o'clock, projecting, if they stay where they're at 74, maybe around the 9:30 slot or so for that. You know, Chris, I've harped on this a little bit over the last, month or so, certainly since last season ended. But one of the things, I'm not naive. You got to draft talent, and you've got to draft guys. And sometimes, when you draft talent, they're not necessarily choir boys.
Right.
But I don't necessarily need a choir boy, but I certainly don't need any more Jadeveon Clowney type attitudes or Perry and Winfrey type. Like, this has to be. And I know you say, well, that's to balance the two. That's not easy. Well, that's why Andrew Berry's job isn't very easy and why he gets paid very good money. But I think this year, this draft more than any, they need to get back to, and I'm not saying that the character wasn't important before, but when you say, tough, smart, accountable, it's got to be tough, smart, accountable in this draft.
It's funny you say that because I got the last question into Andrew at his pre-draft availability a week ago. And my question was just that about not so much tough, smart, accountable, but red flags, because look, they sent 2 messages last offseason, the offseason 2022. They go out and they acquire a quarterback with an ocean liner worth of baggage. More red flags than can't even figure out a way to fit it. A Chinese square.
There you go. I like that. All right, good deal. That's a good effort under the pressure.
And then you say, well, you got George Pickens in there in the draft. And you go, well, no, he's too many red flags, too much of something that nobody will say what this something is, what this red flag is, on, quite frankly, the ideal prospect you could have used. That young receiver who takes the top off of what you're still looking for right now. So I kind of asked him that, and he sort of acknowledged that, look, you're going to have to deal sometimes with some things. It's about balancing it, hoping that you can bring them in, and then that's where you get to tough, smart, accountable. Hope they've developed. The problem is the organization has shown nothing about tough, smart, accountable. Every time they're put in a position, they aren't tough, they aren't smart, and they're not accountable when it comes to these type of things.
Yeah, and
the latest being their 4th round draft pick a year ago, who may not be on the team because he couldn't make it one full off season without getting into trouble.
Yeah, and that's I mean, my gosh, those red flags are obvious, and then on top of it, I mean, I don't know. That's what pro days are for. Andrew has a lot of connections. And I, by and large, I like the job Andrew Berry's done, but there's still, the jury's still out, obviously, on this regime. The one thing that I still can't wrap my head around is you went after Jadeveon Clowney not once but twice, which we know he's talented as hell. But it's not like there's Paul Kuharsky and others from McLean down in there were a ton of folks that were saying this guy he doesn't like to practice and he's injured quite a bit, or at least he pretends to be injured quite a bit, doesn't like to practice. And then the comment at the end of the year about Garrett, like, I mean, you couldn't have had a more me, myself, and I statement. And I'm like, this is a guy that he wanted not once, but twice. And that I'd be lying if I said that doesn't concern me.
No, I mean, it's totally understandable because, again, I go back to they just send so many mixed messages. It's like,
yeah,
you say tough, smart, accountable, and then you go out and acquire Deshaun and everything that's with him. look, I get the gamble the first time with Jadeveon Clowney, and you hit. That's when you got to get up from the table and walk away, not throw more chips on the, chips in. You got your 1 year. You know that you got the full Jadeveon Clowney experience over those 2 years. The Perrion Winfrey. You can kind of go down the list. But at the same time, like you say, you're not always going to get choir boys, and it's just. I don't know if I want choir boys completely either. When I think back to some of the best teams in football,
Sure.
They weren't all choir boys, but
As
there's
long
a
as you're a good
balance. And that's
teammate.
just,
As long
it's fine. Yeah, good. And I think part of the problem is it's still a relatively young roster.
Yeah.
If you look inside, and I think that's why I sort of like maybe adding a Juan Thornhill.
Yeah.
Adding somebody like that who's got multiple rings on his fingers, that he can say, "Hey, look, this isn't how it happens in real organizations, and organizations that actually want to play in the Super Bowl." I would have liked. That's why I would have liked to have seen them get somebody from Philly, Hargraves, or one of those guys, because it'd be like a guy who's been in the Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl, who can say, this isn't how it rolls, where this isn't how it works. Because I don't think there's anybody in that locker room. I think Amari's a great pro. I think he's a terrific pro. But Amari's kind of quiet. He's kind of does his thing, comes in, does the work. I don't think they have anybody in that room that's really been ultra successful in the league. If you're talking about winning, this team has a flash in the pan 2020 playoff run that, quite frankly, how much is that it was 2020. Everything was weird that year. And that seems to have been the outlier for this team. So I'm kind of rambling here. I apologize.
No. I there's a lot to say, quite frankly.
But you bring a Jadeveon Clowney in, and for a lot of those guys, they're like, "Oh my God, I was in middle school when he knocked the helmet off the Michigan kid," or heck, I watched Myles Garrett play. I watched Myles Garrett play in college, and this that I looked up to Myles Garrett and modeled. It's I think getting some veteran guys and just establishing some winning, I think, is what this franchise needs more than anything. I think that's you're just seeing perpetually what happens when basically for 2.5 decades you just suck. For lack of a better term.
All right, Chris. Well, let me leave you with this. We didn't know what was going to happen with Lamar Jackson, and we didn't know not only were they going to sign him, were they was this going to be worked out? I didn't know. About a month ago when we were asked about it, I'm like, look, they're still talking. They'll figure something out. And then I wondered right around the time of the owners' meetings, when Lamar's camp, those tweets were coming out, Jim Harbaugh's meeting with the media. I'm like, John Harbaugh, excuse me. That might not be going over real well with the organization. Has it gone past the point of, no return? Clearly, that's not the case. Lamar Jackson is back in the fold. I think he deserved to get paid, but as far as the Browns go, as far as this division goes, if there was a sliver of hope for some people that, maybe it would be Tyler Huntley tossing the ball around the yard, it's going to be Lamar Jackson, and he's always a pain in their side if he can stay on the field.
Yeah, I heard some people, I saw somebody online say, well, they always win at least one against the Ravens every year. I'm like, yeah, but that one never involves a healthy Lamar Jackson. Like they've beaten Lamar one time when he started, but he left the game like one play into the second quarter.
Yeah.
And Huntley came on and they almost lost that one. But, that's going back to the challenge for this football team this year. Look at that division. I mean, you can make a case for. I mean, Cincinnati's the class of the division, but with Lamar back, I don't necessarily think Baltimore's too far behind them. And then convince me that Pittsburgh's going to be bad, because I believe Pittsburgh's bad when I actually see Pittsburgh being bad, because they never are. They are perpetually, as long as Mike Tomlin's there, they're going to be good. They're going to contend, and so it's on this Browns team to finally put it together, get Deshaun Watson, back to somewhat what he was a few years ago, and get this defense to a point where it can actually stop people consistently instead of being the inconsistent thing they were the last couple of years, and kind of bring this full circle. I think you start doing that tonight with, going out and getting some guys that can actually help you from game one, instead of loading up on, a bunch of, back into the roster special teamers, which is what you often find on with all those day 3 picks.
Chris, appreciate the time, buddy. I know it's a busy, will be an even busier day and night. Browns with 2 picks coming in the 3rd round. Again, 2 in the 4th, 2 in the 5th, 1 in the 6th, and 1 in the 7th. Appreciate you taking the time. Good insight, my friend, and we will do it again soon. Thanks, bud.
Hey, thanks for always having me on.
All right, that is Chris Easterling with the Akron Beacon Journal. We will take a break. When we come back, I have no choice but to call myself out. I've had a few of the culture moments, I'll call them, where people have said, man, you really need to, get cultured, or you can't believe that you never heard of this movie or this A-list celebrity. It happened this morning, and I don't want to say I'm scarred, but I was surprised at the reaction. Maybe you will tell me why I shouldn't be surprised at the reaction. That's on the way next. It's the Chico Bormann Show, hanging with you until 3 on this Draft Day Friday. It's all right here on the Big Play Network. All righty, welcome back on this Friday. It is the Chico Bormann Show here on the Big Play Network. Also available on Twitter if you have not done so already. Go to the Twitter app and at Chico Show, CLE, CHICO Show, SHOW, CLE, and you'll be all ready to go. Also, find us on YouTube. And you can comment on YouTube and all that sort of stuff. So welcome aboard. Glad to have you along here on this Draft Day Friday. Browns with 8 selections, which begin tonight. But there will be a little bit of a wait with 74 coming first. We'll get more into that. Also, I haven't had a chance to catch up with my buddy Michael Bowman on the Cavs aftermath. I kind of had a little bit of a rant yesterday with some of the people that want JB fired and all that good stuff. But anyway, so Bohm, I have mentioned many times, you've known me. We've known each other for a few years now, working together on the radio side of things. And one of the things that, you got to kind of just put it out there. You got to admit it. You got to wear it. Is I am not the most hip on you're already laughing on, like, you'll say, oh, this, did you hear about so and so last night at this club in New York City? And I'll be like, who? And everybody will be like, dude, you've never heard of so and so? Like, come on. Or even like to the movies, you've never seen whatever movie. Yeah, that's usually me. So this wasn't necessarily new, but today I was hit pretty hard with this one. And I'm trying to get a feel for if it was warranted. Like, is this like, as far as the egregiousness of not knowing, is this like a top 3 moment? So I'll just spill it. A buddy of mine asks me this morning, hey, what about going to Columbus with me in September? And I thought it was going to be to see, he's a big soccer guy, right? So I thought it was going to be a soccer man. And I said, and he said to see Wu-Tang Clan. Is that
the Wu-Tang Clan?
Wu-Tang Clan, yeah.
Dollar bills, y'all.
See, that's the meme I'm getting from everybody. Everybody's sending me that meme. So I've probably seen or heard the song, but I don't know. I honestly had never heard him. So I thought that he was giving me like a nickname for a soccer team. And I'm like, who are they playing? He's like, what do you mean, who are they playing? I go, who'd you say? He goes, Wu-Tang Clan. I go, John, I've never heard of those guys. He's like, oh, come on. Yes, you have. And I said, no, I haven't. Like, what are they? He's like, the group Wu-Tang Clan. And he's like, they've been famous for a while. They kind of changed the industry in a lot of ways. And I'm like, I don't know. So somebody else comes by. We're at the gym. Somebody else comes by, another trainer, and he's like just floored, right? Then we asked some girl, and she's like, well, of course I know who Wu-Tang Clan is. And I'm like, oh, thanks. She goes, you've never heard of them? And I'm like, no. She's like, you really need cultured up. Like, exact word. You really need cultured up. Ask one other person. She says the same thing. She's like, oh, yeah, you haven't seen the documentaries on like Netflix and Hulu? And I'm like,
what is wrong with you?
I got roasted. And normally these things roll off my back. So I'm trying to figure out, is this as egregious as I'm being led to believe, that I've never, like, maybe I've heard of this song, Yo Yo More $1 Bill or whatever it is. I don't know. And it's not that I don't like rap. I like New Edition. Big fan of New Edition, Bohm. You know that.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah. Why you all coming down on me trying to tell me how my life is supposed to be? I know you're only trying to help me out, trying to show me what life is really about, but this time I'm going to make it. on my own. So why don't you fellas just leave me alone? Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, and Mike. I love the girl. Who cares who you like? Cool it now. So it's not necessarily like a thing against a brand of music at all. I honestly had never heard of them.
Chico, I think Wu-Tang Clan has to be up there as like one of the most iconic hip hop groups of all time. Like
That's
legendary, the legendary Wu-Tang Clan. When I ask you, I don't know where your base is of like hip hop groups, but if I ask you to tell me who you thought might have been the biggest hip hop group of all time, who might come to mind?
Okay.
Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five?
Yeah, they were definitely on the tip of my tongue. What I'm trying to figure out, like, what exactly is hip hop? Like, what constitutes hip hop? Because I've heard some songs. There's a song out that now I'm starting to like. When it comes on at the gym, I dance. It goes, "Shut up and dance with me." Blah 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 blah. Like, I don't know. Is that hip hop? I don't know what is hip hop.
Chico, I don't think that.
It's not hip hop.
No, I think it's basically rap music in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Over some kind of an electronic beat or like sampled beat. I'm trying to look up like the exact difference between hip hop and rap, but according to a basic Google search, hip hop is a culture with 4 elements: DJing, MCing, graffiti, and dance. And rap is basically like the specific form of music that formed out of that music.
Why do you need graffiti?
It's just a part of the culture. Apparently, you're not cultured enough to understand that aspect of it.
I was told that earlier today, Boom. Yes. So this is a bad one then. Like at first when he said it, I was just like, oh, no big deal. But it was, and they were people around my age. Like, so I thought maybe it was an age thing. They're like, I can't believe you don't. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't know. And like I said, I'm able to laugh at myself on a lot of things, but this one was like can you play? Can you give me a song? Can you give me the Holla Holla Dollar Bill or whatever the hell it is that I don't know that. Like, maybe I've heard it.
I'll have to play it off the air because I don't think I can legally play it over the live stream.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, don't do that.
And I'm not going to sing it for you right now either. Sorry.
Well, that was the other thing. He tried to like sing it at the gym, and I'm like, shut up.
That's not awkward.
Yeah. But it was. I was definitely taken to task.
We all have those things that we're kind of in the dark on that I feel like a majority of people probably know, like whether you've seen that or haven't seen that movie that everyone else has seen that's all the rage and stuff like that.
This was much different than that, though.
This is worse than Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah, okay, Catch Me If You Can was one. Have you never seen that? No, okay.
This is kind of worse, yeah.
Because this one, what was bad about it, too, was it wasn't just their responses, it was the look on their faces. Like, you would have thought, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it was like disappointment, bewilderment.
Have you ever heard of Method Man?
He said that. Yeah, okay, that was another one that he said.
That's a member of the Wu-Tang Clan. Maybe the biggest of the clan.
Roberto Shenanigans says, you rapping Belle Biv DeVoe on air is the highlight of my day so far, but it's still early. That was not Belle Biv DeVoe. That was New Edition. Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, and Mike. I love the girl. Who cares who you like? New Edition, and just recently played here.
That's his band, Roberto. That's his group right there. New Edition. You don't insult them with the Devo, whatever.
Belle Biv DeVoe. I remember
Devo.
that song. All right, Dave, get in here. Here we go. Get it. Yesterday, I had Dave's kid. Dave's kids are probably like, well, yeah. Dave's kids were on the air yesterday. One of his kids were on the air yesterday. They probably would have been like, well, of course I know who Wu-Tang Clan was. Do you know who Wu-Tang Clan is?
I've never met a person who doesn't know who Wu-Tang Clan is. There's no way. Boom. Like, what is going on?
I want to be clear here. I'm not making this up. It's not one of those because
It's not a shtick. I thought it was a shtick.
No, it really
I
is.
was in the office listening. I was like, this has to be a shtick.
And he could tell right away because I thought he was talking about. He said the exact words were, "Hey, in September, you want to go to Columbus with me to see Wu-Tang Clan?" And I wasn't like right next to him, so I thought I just heard him wrong. So I just assumed he meant like to see a soccer team. And I'm like, Wu-Tang, what? He goes, Wu-Tang Clan. I go, what are they?
Chico, fill in the blank. Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to
spit at.
I'm out.
Wu-Tang is for the children, Chico.
Do children listen to Wu-Tang Clan? Clang? Is it clan or clang?
It's clan. The Wu-Tang clang, like banging off of something.
Do kids listen to it? Like, is that? I mean, like kids. Like,
It's a legitimate expression that I am not the first to say.
and the other thing. Okay, one last thing, and I got to get out of here before I embarrass myself any further. The other thing. No, what are you? Oh, come on, Roberto. Roberto's he's convinced that I'm singing Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, Mike, Ralph, and John. No. That's not. This is New Edition, not Belle Biv DeVoe that I was singing. It's all right, Roberto. Okay. Anyway, when they said it, they were around like back in the early '90s, or in the mid '90s is when, and I was in college at that time, like mid '90s, not early '90s, but mid to late '90s, and I remember Snoop Dogg, like I've told you, Thursday nights, Patterson Hall, South Campus, it would blare out of pretty much every dorm room and out of every like shower room of the 4 floors that were there. Like it was always that, and I liked it. Like I'm saying, I didn't, but I knew Snoop Dogg. Like, is that, what's worse? Not knowing who Snoop Dogg is, who I did know, or not knowing who Wu-Tang Clan is?
Honestly, that's a really good question. Because right now, Snoop Dogg is like such a huge part of our society. We see him everywhere. Commercials, ads.
They can't,
He's everywhere.
Wu-Tang can't be bigger than him.
The difference, in my opinion, and I could be partially off here, but I think Wu-Tang was more underground. And I think that Snoop Dogg's music was more mainstream.
What does underground mean?
The scene in which it was built up. I think Snoop Dogg was coming out of the West Coast with like a label that had done a really good job of putting his name out there and putting his brand out there. And I think Wu-Tang, it was more of a ground up process and also the music itself is just less mainstream overall. Like you're not going to hear it on the radios like you may have heard Snoop Dogg back in his prime. But they have, I would say, almost as big of a following, if not more than Snoop Dogg, just because they're such a legendary act and they were so foundational in the direction of hip-hop at that time.
My buddy said they were big with samples. What's samples mean? Like,
samples are what you would take, you sample other songs and you incorporate it into your beat, right? So like one of the first big hip-hop songs was Planet Rock. And that uses a sample from Kraftwerk Trans-Europe Express of a song like back in the 50s or something. So sampling music is very common. One of the most commonly sampled beats of all time is James Brown's Funky Drummer.
Funky. Now I'm familiar with James Brown.
Yeah. The Godfather of Soul.
I gotta bring in somebody here real quick. Chris, you can just answer this. A buddy of mine here at Burke Lakefront Airport. Have you heard of Wu-Tang Clan?
Yeah. Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to with.
Why do they say everybody answers the same way? I've never heard of it. All right.
Cream, Method Man, Cash rules everything around me.
I just preaching. They've all said it 500 times. Yeah, I've never heard of them.
Step up your music game.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. All right, well, there you have it. It is pretty egregious, and this will obviously go down as one of the more embarrassing moments there. All right, 216-626-7901. Maybe you should add, see, I'm going to blame this on you. Maybe if you'd add some Wu-Tang Clan music, maybe I wouldn't be so uncultured.
I'll have to see if I can sample the Wu-Tang Clan out of a Wu-Tang Clan song.
All right, let me ask you a question here, Bohm. Big Play Dave, who was just here in studio, thought he was very rude. But anyway, Big Play Dave and Reflog are going back and forth about like your least favorite draft pick or like the biggest bust, whatever thing, anything like that. And 2014 or not 2014. The Johnny draft. Yeah, it's 2014. Justin Gilbert, Johnny Manziel. Even though there have been other ones, Corey Coleman, 15th overall, Brandon Wheat. I mean, there's too many, obviously, and that's why the Browns were so bad for so long. But this one's tough for me. It's between those two. Because of the Justin Gilbert thing, as I've, mentioned now, like the demons that Pettine addressed, and then the fact that Ray Farmer didn't send anybody to his pro day, an assistant coach would have gladly said, because, again, they're not lying in that situation. They would have gladly said, well, now that you ask, yeah, Justin, I don't know if he loves football. He's got his interests lie elsewhere. I don't know. I don't know if you guys want to take. Because if you remember, they had pick 4, moved down to 9, then moved back up to 8 to get Justin Gilbert. With Manziel, I have to go Manziel because of the position. And because of, I just can't get it out of my mind how many people just made total asses of themselves that night in Cleveland. And not just fans, like media personalities.
Crying
For documentaries. Like, why are you crying? What could bring you to tears for any like, I like the Baker Mayfield pick. I wanted Baker Mayfield, and whatever, we can have a discussion, whatever. But I was never. Why would you cry over Johnny Manziel getting drafted? Why were people like jumping up and down just because he was Johnny Football? Like, it almost embarrasses me as far as like the fan base. Like, come on, man.
And to be fair. No, first off, I agree with your choice of Johnny. I think that's a good one. But for me personally, I'm going to say Brandon Whedon, just because when the Browns drafted Johnny, even if I may have had plenty of concerns, of which I certainly did, there was still some semblance of hope. Like, there was no denying that this guy, if he were able and willing to put his mind on the game, could have been a good player. But he didn't have the work ethic. He didn't have the right mentality. He was lollygagging around.
So you'd put Whedon ahead of what?
I remember it was either my freshman or sophomore year of college when they drafted Whedon, and I remember like hanging out with some friends in an apartment. I was so disappointed with that pick. I had no hope for it. Like, why are you
because of his age? Because
that was a big part of it.
Okay,
but also I think that this is a guy who when you draft players, I think you want them to grow in your organization, and I don't think that Brandon Whedon was going to grow any more than where he was at when you drafted him. And sure, maybe there was some development here, but obviously he was not cut out for it. And it felt like the fact that he was already closer to his peak than most players, being at that age, I didn't really have a lot of hope for that pick. I was really disappointed about it, Chico.
I didn't like it, but I can't say I was. Yeah, I mean, I think because that was also the Trent Richardson draft, right? And I loved the Trent Richardson pick. I admit, I was ticked off when Banner traded. I'm like, what a dumb trade. It ended up being a pretty damn good deal. And he knew what he was doing. But I think with Whedon, well, as soon as I heard, and whenever I hear this about a quarterback, like Blaine Gabbert, I mentioned Blaine Gabbert, that 2011 draft when teams panicked, when teams like Jacksonville said, oh, my God, these quarterbacks are coming off the board. Cam Newton's gone. We'll take Blaine Gabbert. And then Tennessee's like, we'll take Jake Locker. didn't really want. I don't think they really wanted those guys. But one of the things that Blaine Gabbert had that was like part of the skinny on him was he really got rattled when he had pressure in the pocket. Now you say, well, hey, any quarterback, but there are some the great ones, the good ones, the ones that can survive in the NFL, if not flourish in the NFL. It doesn't really bother them, or they're able to stand in there, take some hits, or they've got enough athletic ability to move around in the pocket. Brandon Weeden, I heard the same thing about, and that would have been the next year's draft. So like all I heard about Brandon Weeden was exactly what I heard about Blaine Gabbert, which was deer in the headlights. If he gets you bring pressure, he gets rattled. It doesn't matter how hard he throws the ball. It's going to be probably going to someone else on the other team. And so sure enough, that's kind of exactly what happened with Weeden. But that's interesting.
I also remember going to the first Browns preseason game in Weeden's second year, right? And they just go right down the field and score, but they had all these like excuses for it. And Weeden didn't really do anything impressive. But I remember that I think he just played that one drive, maybe one more. And I walked away from that in typical Browns fan fashion, just feeling so hopeful, like, oh, okay, maybe he actually can command this team. And lo and behold, I should have went with my gut there.
Yeah, I've got to go Manziel, and whatever criteria you want to use for your least favorite draft pick from the Browns, at least in terms of the new regime, I guess we'll do. You've had Junkin or Clifford Charlton or things like that, but at least from the new regime on, I would say it was Manziel, because I didn't like anything about him other than, now admittedly, I'm not going to sit here and tell people that I did not purely and very much enjoy watching Johnny Manziel on college Saturdays. Like if Texas A&M was on, and they were on quite a bit because he was Johnny Football, and when he had the upset of Alabama, like you didn't turn the TV off. I absolutely loved watching him in college. But you heard a little bit of the stuff in college, but then when you really started to get the pre-draft buzz, and I'm like, no, they're not going to do this. And then, like I said, and it wasn't, for me, the thing that sticks to me with this is not only that they took him, but like I said, grown men and women, but grown media personnel. Now I realize there was a camera on him, and there's a documentary being made, and maybe that's why he was crying, but nonetheless, it was just dumb. Like, I've never cried over a draft pick. Why are you crying over Johnny Manziel? Oh, he's relevant. Shut up.
To be fair, I did cry over a draft pick, Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was kind of... And it bothers me. Like, if you were 8, I get it. But you were 15.
This was also my newfound passion at the time, Chico. I was so passionate about the Browns and the draft and these prospects, and I really, I had an absolute man crush on Calvin Johnson. Like, I was really into the idea of him coming to the Orange and Brown.
Can you imagine if he actually went to Ohio State, not Georgia Tech?
Chico, he would have gone first overall.
The crying thing at 15 is a bit disturbing, but I mean, you wear your emotions on your sleeve. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any problem with grown men crying or anybody crying. But when you're crying over Johnny Manziel and it's in like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we finally got it. Oh, they're going the right way. Like, how can you even begin to think that? You can like the pick. I'm not saying you can't like the pick. I hated the pick, but you can like the pick. But nobody should like that pick enough to where they are shedding tears and jumping up and down like they just won the lottery.
And to your point, with just the general discussion of biggest draft busts, no one that I can think of in Browns history, no Browns draft pick, has flamed out in a more unspectacular fashion than Johnny Football. Like, that was...
Yeah.
It was just a really sad progression where it kept getting worse and worse before you know it, he's out of the league.
Well, and then you heard the stories like, okay, yeah, he was going out all the time. I mean, everybody knew that at the very end, but you started hearing that in the very beginning. And then remember the playbook. Like, he couldn't call plays in the huddle. And the thing that bothered me, I'm going to continue on with this now. 216-626-7901. If you have any Johnny Manziel stories or a draft story, a pick that you absolutely hated, let us know. The other thing with Johnny Manziel was like he wasn't even studying the playbook. He'd get in the huddle and he would just start, and like Joe Thomas was there for this, and Joe Thomas, like he'd have to like finish the play for him. And, obviously now at the time there were people in the media sticking up for him. Like I got bashed for it. They're like, Chico, you got to understand, like, he is 21 years old. He wants to go out and have a good time. Not everybody's an old fart like you, not knowing who Wu-Tang Clan is or Wu-Tang Chubber Lang or who Clubber Lang. Not everybody's like you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I'm not an NFL quarterback. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that comes with an extra, a lot of extra responsibility. And I'm tired of hearing the excuses. I'm tired of hearing that, oh, well, hey, just enjoying himself. Sorry, Russ Wilson, other quarterbacks. Russell Wilson lived in the Seahawks facility. There were endorsement deals that he could have had right away, and he said, no, I don't want them. Don't even bring them to me. Told his agent, I think his agent was Rosenhaus, don't even bring them to me. And he would literally sleep at the Seahawks facility, just wanting to absorb as much as he could. And then, okay, that stuff came. Johnny wanted all of that at the beginning and didn't want to work at all. And so it was just like, you could see this storm coming from hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And yet people were really fired up and excited about it. And it's just, to this day, is beyond me. I don't get it. All right, Bohm, go ahead.
I think it can be tough sometimes, especially like for Browns fans. And I'm not always innocent of this either, but I think it can be tough sometimes to accept wasted talent, right? Like, that Johnny Manziel is a talent, but it's going to waste and he's flaming out, and this is really bad for the organization. But when you're a fan, there's almost like this bias of you want it so badly to work out, and this guy feels like he could be our quarterback because we've seen him do it just on a college football field. And there's so many reasons to have hope. And yet it just feels so difficult at times. And I think for me, like, for a long time, it took me a while to come around to, I guess, get over Deshaun Kaiser. Like, going into his second year, I thought...
Another one.
Yeah, like, I thought he could be something if putting in the time, if good coaching. Obviously, I was dead wrong about that, but I think that that's common amongst Browns fans who have had to deal with such mediocrity for so long.
How did they get so many wrong?
Right.
I mean, it really, let's be honest. It's not an easy process, but it's pretty damn hard to bomb out on picks like they did in the first round. Like, you never heard. The idea of a guy getting a second contract was like, it was a foreign concept here for a while. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I wonder, parting thought on Johnny Manziel, I do wonder if he did apply himself, like, how good could he have been? I think he would have been okay. I don't think he would have been, because I've heard people say if he applied himself, pros are different. I mean, it's just it's an entirely different game. All right, real quick before we get out of here, there was, I don't know if you were here for it, but the backlash against the Cavs. Now, they played they played like crap this series. There's just no getting around it. They got pushed around, they got bullied, and the fact that it was the Knicks made it worse. But there was a lot of, the night of, and even the next day, and even still today, JB Bickerstaff, he should be fired before his press conference. Like, just let him go. I thought that was ridiculous. Like, what are your thoughts, Bohm, about what went down with the Cavs in that Knicks series?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I left after game 2, and we felt so good about this team moving forward here in this series. How the tables have turned. How the turntables. Because...
How the turntables.
Yeah, a little hip-hop reference for you there, Chico.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and matter of fact, I heard that in one of Wang Chung's songs. Everybody Wang Chung tonight. Anyway, go ahead. Boom.
Wu-Tang, Wang Chung, Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah. They're a good team.
Yeah. So I think the one big thing was just we saw how they were sort of able to bully the Knicks in game 2, and then it just all went out the window for the remainder of the series. And I'm wondering, I have a lot of questions heading into this offseason, and I'm hoping, my hope is that this will be the wake-up call for this team that they need, the slap in the face to really get into better condition going into the next postseason. But it felt like right now there's got to be questions surrounding Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and what they can do against more physical big men.
I think Mobley will be fine. I think there's legitimate questions about Jared Allen. I would say this, when I'm saying that I thought there was overreaction as far as firing Bickerstaff, I still believe that. What I am not
Agreed.
saying is that, like, I'm not getting him off the hook, or I'm not saying, oh, you can't blame. Everybody is caught. When you get your asses kicked like that, and there's talk about effort and, rebounding is just a joke. Hustle at times was a joke. Obviously you're not making shots. Donovan Mitchell, the guy that, you brought here and you thought was going to 2 games, he just does nothing. I mean, but I'm not letting JB off the hook, but people thinking that he should have been canned after the season is just mind-boggling to me.
That feels over the top to me as well, Chico. But I wanted to tell you, I just remembered. I heard a pretty outrageous fan take earlier today before I was coming in. I overheard someone say that the Cavs should not have traded Donovan Mitchell, and they'd be much better off if they just kept Lauri Markkanen.
Lauri Markkanen had a great year.
All-star, Chico.
Yeah, most improved player was he? I think too. Yeah, he was good, but yeah, we'll let that one be. Am I getting crushed at all for Wu-Tang Clan? Is that a consensus? It's bad.
It's not ideal.
Okay, thank you, Bo. We'll end on that. It's not ideal, Chico. All right, folks.
An ideal ending.
Folks, have a good weekend. Enjoy the draft. Browns do have 2 picks tonight. It's going to be a little while, so go out, maybe have some dinner, maybe go out clubbing, go out and dance to Wu-Tang Clan, and then be right around 9:30. You probably want to be tuned in, as the Browns will be picking 74th and 98th overall. There are 2 picks in the 3rd, 2 picks in the 4th, which, of course, those are going to come on Saturday as far as the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round. So we're out of time. Thanks to Chris Easterling for joining us. Boom, great to have you back. All you fans of Wu-Tang Clan, I'm gonna knowledge up on it this weekend. I'm gonna watch a few documentaries, maybe. All right, I'm Chico Bormann. We'll be back with you again on Monday, beginning at 1, talking about this draft right here on the Big Play Network.